In my Oxford MBA interview, the first thing the deputy dean said was, "Wow, you graduated with a 4 out of 4 GPA and first in your class of 1,668 students. Tell me what that was like." And the truth? I didn't get there by studying 12 hours a day. I got there by making strategic decisions about where I could excel and when to pivot. Today, I'm breaking down the 3-part strategy that I've never shared about how I actually did it. Hi, I'm Caitlin Anderson, graduate admissions consultant and Oxford MBA who has helped hundreds of students win interviews and offers to all the top business schools in the world, including Harvard, Stanford, Oxford, MIT, and Yale, and win over $1 million in scholarships. From the start of my college journey, I had one main goal. I wanted to excel at life. Okay, so it didn't mean just get good grades. I wanted to gain real leverage. And that was going to start by understanding what excellence would mean for me, given my circumstances, strengths, and goals. I've always had this strategic brain where I could think long term and see trade-offs and understand leverage. And that's probably why I became a strategist in the end. But in a very driven culture like we have in the United States, I saw very early on, probably middle school or early high school, that metrics of success or quantifiable results matter a lot. What were your grades? What place did you get? First, second, or third? How many games did you win? And while I think that is changing a little bit, our world is still really obsessed with quantifiable results. So even when I'm helping my students apply to top business school programs in the world, I'm helping them to quantify their resume so that every bullet point has some number in it and bring in tangible results to their personal branding. I used this understanding of what people in the world prioritize to inform my strategy for college. So now I want to break down that 3-part strategy for you that led me to attain a 4 out of 4 GPA and rank first in my class of 1,668 students so that you can use it to set yourself up for academic success. Step 1 is to gather the data. I want you to answer the question, what subjects were you naturally good at as a child? Now, if you don't have any idea, I can tell you that generally most of us will fall into these 2 buckets of being either more poet-like or more quant-like. So in the poet bucket, you'd be better at English and writing and communication and art subjects. And in the quant bucket, you'd be better at mathematics, sciences, technology subjects. So you can start there thinking about which subjects you might have been better at, because we want to choose a major where when you're completing the classes at the highest level, the 300 level, 400 level classes, you're gonna be able to tap into your natural strengths. We want to answer the question, when you didn't know whether you'd be good or bad at a subject, how did you do at those subjects? And that should tell you a lot. The way I got that information was I went back to my primary school transcripts and looked across the years, was there some trend? Was I consistently performing better in some subject than another? And which subjects were those? And I can tell you that without trying, I wasn't aware that I'd be good or bad at any of these topics. I consistently, across grades 1 to 5, was scoring in the 99th percentile in writing. Now I was scoring in the 90th percentile in English, in the 70th percentile in mathematics, and even lower in science, probably 50th or 60th percentile. So looking at that trend and seeing that data for when I was very young, and I would have no way of understanding and identifying with English being my subject or math not being my subject, I was naturally performing better in English and writing. And so that helped me when I was designing my strategy for college. Now, if you can't find your elementary or primary school transcripts, don't worry. You could ask a parent, guardian, or sibling if they remember which subjects came more easily to you as a child. Or if you're already in college and took the SAT or ACT, you can look at those standardized tests and see which topics you are just naturally doing better on consistently across attempts, and that should give you some information about where your strengths lie. The other part of this data gathering phase is you need to take a very good, honest look at your schedule and see how much time you'll actually have each week to dedicate to your studies. That is going to inform which major you choose and whether that major is needing to be more aligned with your strengths so that you can dedicate less time to that major, or if it can be a little bit more challenging for you so that you have the time maybe that you can invest to master those concepts and get the straight A's that you're looking for. So you've got to take a real look at that. Now, if you're working full-time or you're taking care of a family member, those things take a certain amount of time and focus on your part. And so choosing an extremely challenging, very hard major for you, because it's not within your natural wheelhouse, might not be the best option for you. Or maybe you decide to go to school part-time so that you only take a few classes within that very tough major because you only have the time to dedicate to those classes. So you could take that strategy. For me, during the first 2 years of college, I worked full-time. And then during the remaining year and a half, I worked part-time. So I didn't have the luxury of 10 or 12-hour study days. So that's why I chose to lean into my strengths by picking communication as my major. And that's not weakness, that's strategy. Step number 2 is to use the data to pick your major or transfer into a new major. So by the time I got to college, I understood very well that I didn't have the mathematics and sciences abilities that many of my other peers had, nor the interest in the subjects, and I was too emotional about them because I already knew at that point that I was not naturally that great at math or science. And so I used that information to evaluate different majors. And for me, I was deciding between communications and business. Okay, what courses was I required to take in those, and how most likely could I perform in the short period of time that I had for each class, which was usually 3 months. You know, it moves quickly and you have to do quizzes and you have to do midterms, and there's a lot of grading that happens throughout that time. So I looked at that and I understood, okay, either I could pick business where I'm gonna have to do calculus and all these very quantitative type classes and end up performing maybe average or a little above average or below average, or I could pick a major like communication where I can lean into my strengths and I would need less time to be able to master the high level concepts within that major so that I could be the best in that major in the end. So that's why I chose communication. Now, I still had to take quantitative classes within my communications major, such as Introductory Microeconomics, Foundations of Accounting, and Survey of Finance. But I chose not to add extra pressure on myself to perform and compete against people who naturally understood those topics and then could perform better at a much higher level. So that was my strategy, choosing to challenge myself to the point where I knew it was still going to be very difficult for me. But I also knew that if I put my head down and I did the work, I had a high chance of succeeding in that major. And so that was extremely important to me at the early phase of my career when I was trying to build credibility for the world. I really wanted this piece of paper to say, look, I can contribute some value. Now, I knew down the road that there might be a question mark as to could I have performed better in a more quantitative major, etc. But that was going to be an eternal unknown, and I was happy to leave it that way because the only thing that could be known after my major was done and I had this GPA was she performed at the top of her class in this major. Who knows what else she could have done? Step number 3 is to pay attention to your results and pivot when needed. So now that you've set yourself up for success by picking a major that's very well aligned with your strengths and your realistic availability, you need to monitor your performance. I didn't perform well in my classes because I used apps or a 5-step framework. I performed well because I paid attention to what was working. And if something wasn't working, I tossed it. So I experimented with different tools that I came across. Like I tried flashcards, I tried outlining, I tried rewriting ideas, I tried speaking out loud the concepts or explaining it to somebody else. And in the end, the combination that worked for me was outlining, rewriting ideas, and speaking the concepts out loud. Usually to myself, but it worked for me. And so you have to find out what are those things that allow you to retain information in the best way, and then combine them with other tools and find your optimal combination of things. And keep looking for more tools, for more resources that can help you improve your studying if you haven't found that optimal combination. The other really important practice that I developed while I was in college that led to my success was organization. Now, for every class that semester, I had a separate binder. I actually really enjoyed creating these binders. I printed out a sheet to go into the front pocket that said the name of the class, said the location of it, said the professor's name, said the time of the class so I wouldn't get confused about where I was supposed to be when. And I made binders for each one of those classes. Within those binders, I would make separate dividers for each one of the topics. I put notes, I put homework, I put sections like the syllabus so that I could find that quickly. So I spent a lot of time learning that organizing myself in that way ahead of time at the very beginning of the semester was extremely helpful to me when I was in the hustle and bustle and trying to keep track of things and assignments. And that really helped. And I also had a master calendar. And that was really crucial to me. And I liked it to be tangible, one I could write on and I could move things around. Now, if you want to use a virtual calendar or some of these amazing apps that are out there, I encourage you to do that. But that was essential for me to have that as like a primary place where I knew, okay, this homework assignment was due, this exam was due. And that organization and the level of that detail came as I was learning in the first semester. Okay, wow, there's a lot of information and things happening all at the same time. How do I keep track of it? So you can find your system, but being really organized with your materials was something that I would really encourage you to do, because that was what really helped me stay on top of everything and not miss something that would lower my grade. Here's a bonus hack for you. It's a tough truth that I learned pretty quickly into the game, is that the topics that you avoid studying are what usually break you on the exam. So I saw that I had this tendency to just brush past these topics within a subject that I felt fuzzy about or gray on. And I realized that that was really sinking me in the graded assignments, and that I needed to, instead of just moving past it because it was unfamiliar or I wasn't sure I could understand it quickly, I instead reprogrammed my brain to shift my focus and stare at that thing that was fuzzy in my brain. And you know it, when you're learning something, you understand what it is that maybe doesn't make sense to you. And I think in our society, a lot of times we don't want to admit that we don't understand something because we think somebody else might think that we are less intelligent or less capable, and that just hurts us in the end. So if somebody said something you don't understand, just say, hey, I didn't really fully understand that. Could you explain it differently? Or if you're by yourself doing a homework assignment, just say it to yourself, I didn't understand that. And you can even say it out loud. What can I do to try to understand this better? Maybe there's a YouTube video. Maybe you need to go to a tutor on campus, but figure out some way to face that ugly topic that you can't get instantly until it makes sense. Now, the other thing is I've had people tell me that they use the idea that if you can explain it to somebody else, then it means you really know it, and I think that's great, so I think you should use that too. My final words of advice would be, don't waste time trying to prove yourself in the wrong arena. It's tempting to think that you have to take the hardest major for you to prove your intelligence. But here's what I believe. Being the best in the right arena will open more doors for you than being average in an arena that you picked just to impress people. And being at the top of your field, whatever that field is, sends a very powerful message to the world that you are capable of being focused, persistent, and excellent. And that's what can be used as real leverage. That's it for now. If you found this video helpful, then please give it a like and subscribe. I give weekly videos on academic success and business school admissions tips. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.